Yeah, this is easily the most controversial 3D Zelda game of the line. A lot of people hated on it. Ego Raptor most fervently verted a new one.
Serious? God, shut up! Seriously! You want all this attention like you care, like you really gave it your all in a new innovative Zelda experience, but instead you led Zelda into a frustrating monotony. You know, what started the franchise was like the sense of wonder, and what has thus far concluded the franchise is a sense of formality. A predictable, time-consuming mess that asks you not of your sense of adventure, or even your wits, but instead your ability to listen and follow directions. You ask of us our ability to point something at something else and then walk towards it. You ask of us our willingness to get another bow and arrow, fight another boss with another giant glowing eyeball. Gee, I wonder how to fucking beat it. I fucking wonder, Skyward Sword. You ask of us to get a cat from the top of a roof and carry him over to some guy who says thank you. The Adventures of Link, Cat Delivery Man. Is that your title? What's the tagline in the ads? Cat's out of the bag and onto the roof. 10 out of 10. No Wiimote motion issues here that could possibly cripple the entire experience. Best in the series. You're like a spoiled rich kid who gets everything bought for you your entire life. And then when it comes to making it on your own, you can't take it. You expect everyone to love you because you are who you are, part of the illustrious Zelda lineage. Nothing could possibly be wrong with you. You look just like a Zelda. But you're not one. You're a pampered, doughy snob wearing nice clothes, expecting to graduate scot-free because your daddy's an alum. Why would you need to improve? Why would you need to get any better? Everyone just agrees with your shitty ideas because you're a Zelda. Fuck you, Skyward Sword.
Yeah, calm down a little bit there, buddy. One of the things I remember about the original release was how people really didn't like this game's hand-holding sections. This was near the end of the Wii's lifespan, and it seemed Nintendo had embraced play it for you. Fi, how do you pronounce her name anyway? I'll look it up. Rhymes with my. Huh. Okay then. Was one of the most hated characters in the series. I even took a shot at her in my old Mario Galaxy 2 video. I hate that video, by the way. Don't watch it. As it turned out to be fortunate timing, Skyward Sword HD was announced when it was the next Zelda game on my list to play. So for once, I actually timed something right. Both the HD remasters of Wind Waker and Twilight Princess made significant improvements to the original games, so a lot of people hoped Skyward Sword would do the same. Well, I'll get into that, but first we gotta go over some development history. The year was 2007. The Japanese video game market was declining rapidly, with an ever-increasing focus on portable games. In fact, Phantom Hourglass was seen as a moderate success in Japan, while Twilight Princess sold very well globally, its sales were considered underwhelming in Japan. Nintendo had seen this shift coming. As late Satoru Iwata said in 2004, prior to the launch of the DS, games have come to a dead end. Creating complicated games with advanced graphics used to be the golden principle that led to success, but it is no longer working. The biggest problem is that developers need to satisfy the core gamers, who want games with more volume and complexity, while they also need to satisfy average users who don't have as much knowledge about games. The situation right now is that even if the developers work 100 times harder, they can forget about selling 100 times more units, since it's difficult for them to even reach the status quo. It's obvious there's no future to gaming if we continue to run this principle that wastes time and energy in development. This was the goal with the DS and Wii. Nintendo would invent new ways to play their games without focusing too much on jaw-dropping graphics. The innovations, of course, were the DS's style pen gameplay and the Wii's motion control gameplay. Development for Skyward Sword started in 2007, shortly after Twilight Princess was released. Like I said, sales for the game were weak in Japan. This was the reason because they didn't think the Wii was much of a market for hardcore gamers, and this approach had an effect on many of their Wii-era games, such as why Super Smash Bros. Brawl was so casual-focused. Or at least I suspect that's why. But the first 2 years of development were basically spent trying to fine-tune the Wiimote Plus controls. The world of Skyward Sword was deliberately made more compact because they felt exploratory games were the opposite of what gamers wanted. They felt games were growing too complicated. In fact, Skyward Sword has no real overworld at all. You just simply go to here and there and do what you need to do. The Zelda team thought that perhaps Zelda didn't need those roads and they weren't key to the series' success. After all, going world to world in Mario was simple enough. You just went to the courses you wanted to go, and why not do that with Zelda? Inoma later added, I think we were able to keep such a big project together because the game world this time is structurally simple. We talk about all these dense places, but structure-wise there are only 4. Forest, volcano, desert, and sky. For story purposes, the team decided to explore the origins of the Zelda mythology, such as the creation of Hyrule and the Master Sword. So once again, we were telling the origin for Zelda, but Ganon, the series' main antagonist, couldn't appear because it was pretty clear that Ocarina of Time was the first time Link and Ganon clashed. So they had to think of something else. What they came up with was questionable. We'll get to it. Skyward Sword met something of a mixed reception when it launched in 2011. While critics loved it, fans in the US were pretty mixed due to the lack of exploration and the fact that the game was extremely linear and it didn't do much better in Japan, only selling over 3,000 units. This would lead us into the direction of the next Zelda, but that's for another time. I remember when the game was first shown at E3 2010, or was it 2009? Memory's a little fuzzy. They had problems getting the motion controls to respond properly. I think they would have tested that before showing it on stage. One thing I'll also note is that the HD remasters for Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword all came out 10 years after their original release. Either that's an amazing coincidence, or Nintendo planned that all along. Well, all that's taken care of. Let's get into our story. Our prologue this time tells of a great war. Feels like Hyrule's had like 5 great wars that depict its history. A battle of good and evil. The evil forces led by Demise, bit on the nose with that name, against the goddess Hylia, who was entrusted by the 3 goddesses to watch over the land. I must admit I do like the prologue. The way it takes the story through paintings is a rather effective way to get the story across. The goddess cropped up the surviving humans and sent the land they were on skyward. And the battle between good and evil waged on, and eventually Demise, or as he's known in the Japanese version, the bringer of Demise, was sealed away, seemingly for good. Once again, we open with Link having a prophetic dream, which calls back to Ocarina of Time. Skyloft is quite breathtaking in its atmosphere, and we begin once again with Link being woken up. So Link this time is a bit of a klutz. Guess that fits him. From then on, the player is introduced to the inhabitants of Skyfall, and they're all fine, I suppose, if generic. We keep with the tradition of Zelda having a father but no mother, and Link not having parents at all. Link and Zelda are once again childhood friends in this game, and while the opening of the game attracts a lot of criticism for its slow beginning, most of it is spending time to set up Link and Zelda's relationship. In fact, they're really laying on the Z-Link teases.
You're into shipping? Join the Navy!
Yeah. Back to what I was saying, Link and Zelda's relationship having romantic overtones, or is it undertones, is honestly nothing new. After all, Zelda 2 clearly ends with Zelda giving Link a kiss, and the Zelda cartoon did hint that the relationship was romantic. Oh, she just tried to kill him. How lovely. The next section of the prologue, with Link searching for his missing Lothling, introduces us to Groose, who I swear reminds me of Biff from Back to the Future. Groose starts off the rival to Link, particularly over Zelda. He's the character who gets the most character development in the game. I'll cover that later. I do appreciate the moments where Link can snark back. It also serves to show how spunky Zelda is in this game. You go, girl. Like Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword gets criticized for its slow start. It takes about a half an hour to get the sword. Zelda games have increasingly relied on overly long tutorials, and they made a point of reducing that in future games, thankfully. So once again, Link and Zelda are sharing an intimate moment. What a cock tease. I demand a kiss. Apparently the opening of Skyward Sword was even longer with more cutscenes, but the team cut a lot of scenes so they could keep the scene in where she leaps onto Link's waffling. But as always, just when things are looking up, a tornado separates Link and Zelda. Zelda falling looks very familiar. So Link wakes up and meets Fi, who is basically a robot, always speaking like she's a computer for whatever reason. Come to think of it, I don't think Zelda has computers, so why she talk like one? So Link finally gets the sword. Only took about an hour into the game this time, much shorter than Twilight Princess, which required a lot more effort. Well, that's not cryptic, is it not? So if Link finally donning his green tunic with the hat, even though Minish Cap seemed to be the origin for how Link got his hat, but this game's just kind of ignoring that. In fact, the prologue for Minish Cap showed a Link that didn't have a hat, so if Skyward Sword Link was hatless, it would all be perfect and make sense, but no. Link lands on the surface of what we will come to know as Hyrule, but it's not actually called that yet. Link must carry on his journey to find and rescue Zelda, aided by this old woman who... we'll get back to her. Basically, what's implied is that while Link is off searching for her, Zelda is having her own adventure, and the team did consider making her a playable character, where you saw her side of the story, but didn't make it into the game. A shame the Wii didn't really do DLC. It probably would have been DLC. Also, you look through the gate behind the old woman, and you see some strange crystal. What could that be? I wonder. So the next story-related bits happen when Link reaches the first dungeon and meets Girahim. In his first scene, we establish his character pretty well. Girahim was deliberately designed to contrast with Ganondorf, the usual antagonist. Compared to Ganondorf's very masculine, powerful, evil characteristics, Girahim is, well, very feminine, so to say. He's also an evil counterpart to Fi. Girahim is over-the-top, emotional, and flamboyant, while Fi is subdued and stoic, and like Link, both are chasing after Zelda. You really get the sense that he's just hiding a bloodlust. Unfortunately, he tends to fall into Bond villain stupidity. He even says that he should have killed Link when he had the chance instead of just toying him, but decides to not kill Link then anyway. Going through Elden Volcano, we got our first glimpse at Impa.
Hey!
In fact, her design calls back to her Ocarina of Time look. She once again serves her role as Zelda's guardian. I really wish we got to see more Impa and Zelda scenes. I do love the scene where after the second dungeon, Link and Zelda finally meet, but Impa doesn't let her go to him, and she says this to him. Her words are harsh, but they carry some truth to them, and you can have Link take those words to heart, as after the third dungeon, Link is able to prevent Girahim from reaching Zelda, and I couldn't resist having him say this. Let's just say that by the next time I saw Impa, I figured out what the twist was. That she and the old woman were one and the same, as evidenced by they both had the tear scar under their eye, though faded with age. So this is an acknowledgement of both her appearances as the old lady and the badass Sheikah warrior. As for Groose, he's the character who gets the lion's share of character development. Starting out as the rival to Link, I just love the part where he follows Link. I love Link's face. It's so full of "Dear Goddess, no." Still, Groose gets over being in a strange land very quickly. You got my vote, Chief. Groose finds that he is not the one to save Zelda, and at first he feels completely useless, but realizes that he can help in his own way by building the catapult that helps fight the imprisoned. And even then realizes that it's not his destiny to save Zelda, and accepts that. One thing I must admit I don't like: after Link gets the 3 tablets and returns to the Sacred Temple, you typically expect something to open up. In A Link to the Past, after getting all 3 pendants and the Master Sword, you unlock the Dark World. In Ocarina of Time, after getting the 3 spiritual stones, you unlock time travel, and so on and so forth. But here, the time gate just kind of sits there, and you're told you have to go do more stuff to unlock it. What a cock tease. The imprisoned is our big threat. A big part of the game is keeping him imprisoned. But it's really hard to take him seriously due to his design. It's just a black blob with toes that stick out, and all that ends up doing is exposing his weakness. My toes are weak, strike them. Then he gets fingers. Ooh, it just makes him look even sillier. I get that he's more of a force of nature and he's not quite full power, but there had to have been a better design than this. The game's story revolves around forging the Master Sword. They didn't even try to keep this a secret. Act 1 just kinda lengthens the blade. Act 2 doesn't really do anything outwardly, it just looks a little better. But the final dance makes the Master Sword at last, but it's lacking something. It's not quite at its full splendor yet. All that is about to change when Link finally meets Zelda in the distant past, where Hylia has only just sealed away demise. This scene of Zelda explaining the past lore of what we know as Hyrule serves to show how far our character has come, and we find out that Link is Hylia's chosen hero, and Zelda is the goddess Hylia reborn as a mortal. This does explain why Zelda's body has been used by evil forces for her power, as seen in Minish Cap and Spirit Tracks. But Zelda has to seal herself away to lengthen the seal on demise. The expressions on Link are very good as Zelda sacrifices herself to sleep. So what can I say about Skyward Sword's story? I do appreciate the attempts to enhance the lore. The origin of the Master Sword, Skyloft crew that becomes the city in the sky in Twilight Princess, a nice little bit of world building there. Ghirahim as an antagonist is a refreshing change of pace, even if he does suffer from Bond villain stupidity. But the biggest problem is, well, Vi, because people don't like her, mostly because of her constant interruptions in the original game, and the fact that for most of the game, she acts like an emotionless robot. Now, technically, she is an emotionless robot, and it would be fine if she started out that way, but she really should have opened up more to Link as time went on, showing more worry and happiness for him. But what the story did do well was make you care about Link and Zelda, and you really want to go on this journey to save Zelda. The team went with a mix of cel-shaded and realistic graphics, thus creating a nice little mix of the looks of Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. The world of pre-Hyrule is lush, and everything is pretty empty, and that's basically the whole point, since this is before civilization was established. Skyward Sword's unique visual style is owed to Miyamoto's love of Impressionism, inspired by the paintings of Cezanne. All this does is give Skyward Sword its own unique feel compared to the other 3D Zeldas. There is nice variety in the 3 land areas, but that's the problem. There's only 3 of them. I'll get into that shortly. For the first time, Zelda has fully orchestrated music. Long overdue, I'd say. After Mario Galaxy, it was only a matter of time before Zelda got orchestrated music. My particular favorite song is with Link and Zelda's romance theme. It definitely helps set the mood for Link and Zelda's scenes together. Since I'm playing this off the Switch HD remaster, everything has been upscaled to 1080p and looks pretty nice. Skyward Sword was the last Zelda game that needed an HD remaster. Should've waited to do your Zelda 3D marathon by a few years, some call me Johnny. I love how it all runs in 60 frames per second, and the game has very few loading times thanks to the enhancements. So I think Skyward Sword is a very pretty game, but this was just a small bit. Let's go into the main meat of the video, the gameplay. Skyward Sword was perhaps the first Zelda game to try to take advantage of the Wii's motion controls. It came out a year before the end of the Wii's lifespan, so everything about the game is about using your Wii remote as the sword. The idea was to allow greater control over Link's sword than ever before. But that being said, using the motion controls took some getting used to. Enemies will now shield themselves from certain angles, meaning you gotta swing your sword from the proper angle to damage them, and I swear at times that I was doing that, but no, it didn't register properly, so I ended up paying the price. At the beginning I thought it was odd that the game starts you off with 6 hearts instead of the usual 3, but then I realized that was to ease the frustration of the motion controls from experienced Zelda players. The HD release does add a way to do it without motion controls. You use the right analog stick, which works fine for what it is, but the game was meant to be played with motion controls, so that's what I largely stuck with, except for a few instances. With Dooku Babos, for example, you are meant to swing your sword in a certain way to destroy them. I find this to be a fine addition that neither makes or breaks the game. One new addition to Link's ability that was long overdue was the ability to sprint. No longer do you have to roll to make decent progression on foot. By holding down the A button, Link can dash and then roll. Once that stamina meter runs out, Link will have to wait to recharge a bit. Yeah, this mechanic debuted here before Breath of the Wild made it famous. One thing that the HD edition gets rid of is the constant reminder of what the item is every time you pick something up, with one notable exception. I'll get into that later. Our first area, Farad'n Woods, is a nice little forest area. The creatures, the Kikuwas, are actually rather endearing. I'm guessing they're distant ancestors of the Kokiri in Ocarina of Time, before they became the Koroks. Really don't get how the forest spirits work, but there's no great Deku tree, so yeah, never mind. After a hide-and-seek search which highlights the use of dowsing, an ability that I consider very overused in this game because you're constantly in first person while doing it, which means that you can't defend yourself against enemy attacks. It was a nice idea, just not properly integrated. It's here that you get the slingshot. It's made a little more useful than in Twilight Princess because you have to use it a lot more often, although I actually let down the rope earlier ahead of time and the game acknowledged that. One thing I am not a fan of is the tightrope walking, as it is just clumsy to control with motion controls, but I can switch to regular controls on the fly so this complaint is negated. Going back to the sky can be done at a bird statue, but if you have the Zelda and Laufling amiibo, you can return to the sky whenever, which is a little annoying that it's behind an amiibo, but it's appreciated nonetheless. The Crimson Laufling doesn't have a name like Epona or the King of Red Lions, so it's hard to get attached to him. Flying with him can take some getting used to going off the motion controls. Flapping my arms like I'm a bird, it takes some practice. That being said, I wish the Land of Sky had a little more variety in the islands you explore. A lot of them are big rocks. They attempt to add exploration through the Goddess Cubes. Link must activate them on the surface, and then go find them in the sky, and this usually leads to rewards of various qualities. Not the best, but not the worst either. Oh look, there's a heart piece on the chandelier. Well, as goes in Zelda, I'll just break it and be on my merry way. That doesn't happen in Zelda. You're disrupting the nature of things. The balance of the universe is undone. Good and evil are no longer in perfect symmetry. What have you done, game? What have you done? Skyloft is compact, but it has plenty for you to do, such as accessing Beetle's shop, where you can find various items to help you, such as the bug net. Of course, one time I was just browsing, and then this happened.
Oh! Hi!
Hey, I had every right to come in and browse. You don't kick a man out for that. We'll come back to Skyloft where I'll cover some of the side quests in more detail, so now we'll cover the first dungeon, Skyview Temple. Skyview Temple has all the basics for a classic Zelda opening dungeon. It's very linear and it's pretty obvious to where you need to go. The temple is filled with large overgrown mushrooms and underwater sections, but you cannot dive. That is very cryptic for some reason. I'll say the adventure pouch has gotten some unneeded refinements as Link now has limited options to fill his pouch with. You can expand it, but I guess even Link's pockets have limits. The spiders in this game require hitting them on the precise spot on their back. With motion controls, that's a little tricky to do. Skyview Temple is based around teaching you the mechanics to the game. A switch here that you need to press to open the doors. One of the weirdest things is the eye puzzles where you have to rotate your sword in a circle to make the eyes go away. Easy enough, but still a little annoying. The Stavros mini-boss is your first reminder of how to use your sword. He telegraphs the way you have to swing your sword to be able to hit him. Once he's down, you get the beetle, and this is a very useful item. After letting it fly, Link can control the beetle, and it proves useful in cutting down enemies who hang from the ceiling or making things drop. A nice little way to survey what you're about to go into, but of course it has limited stamina, and if you cause it to crash, it will automatically come back to Link. Fortunately, whatever you pick up will automatically go to Link when it returns. There's really not much to say about this dungeon. It's a warm-up with the real thing. I will say this, I really don't like the big keys in this game because you have to turn them so they are at the right angle. Annoying to do with motion controls. Our first boss, Girham, is, well, he's designed to get you used to the mechanics of the sword fight. I was pleasantly surprised that when he blocked my sword, he actually stole it and I had to resort to the shield bash to get him to drop it. A nice little touch there. The trick is to not be so obvious as to how to telegraph your attacks.
You have to quickly move to the other direction, so Girahim is just an easy warm-up boss. But this isn't the only time you fight him, and that becomes a part of a problem with the bosses. Now I'll talk more detail about the side quests on Skyward. The way you change from day to night is by sleeping. Link can sleep in anyone's bed, which just raises some questions. But at night, he goes down to a house and finds a demon named Batrix. He's a friendly guy, but to help him become human, Link must collect gratitude crystals, which is accomplished by helping people on Skyward with their problems. That chandelier repair is just part of it. A lot of it is accomplished by gradually going in and out, such as earning the attraction of the item check girl. The option of how to respond to her affection is yours, but I found that I just didn't have it in me to shoot her down. But my heart is still for Zelda. Sorry. There's also the love letter. You can deliver to the girl or the toilet hand. This time around I opted for the girl and I managed to spawn a relationship much to Bruce's friend's dismay. Better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all. Wait, that doesn't work here, does it? I will say this about Skyward. It does its job as a hub world for you to go to and relax when you are not on the surface fighting monsters. Some of the mini-games are nice little distractions if nothing else, such as this bamboo cutting mini-game. There's also this dive mini-game that gets you rupees. I actually decided to turn the motion controls off for this part, and I was able to do it pretty easily. Not that doing it with motion controls is hard, but in this case I'd much rather do it the normal way.
Now let's head down to Elden Volcano. The beginnings of what would become Death Mountain, I suppose. I do like each of the areas are named after one of the light spirits from Twilight Princess, a nice little continuity nod. I should talk about the shields and how they can degrade over time, so Link has to be selective on what shield he wants to take with him. Upon arriving, Link will meet the inhabitants of Elden Volcano, the Magma. On his travels, Link will receive the Digging Mitts, which allows Link to dig up treasures. It's automatically made a part of Link's arsenal, so there's no need to equip it, and I like that. You don't have much control over the sailcloth, but it does allow you to ride currents of wind. Hold on that idea for a few years. Most of the journey up the mountain relies around using your wits to explore, but then you have to find 5 pieces of the temple key, which just feels like padding. I'm going to be using that word a lot. I do like the new mechanics of bomb throwing, as you can throw them underhanded. This took a few tries to get used to. Once you get access to the bomb bag, Link can now pocket bombs he picks up for later use. A long overdue improvement in my opinion. The Earth Temple is basically the Fire Temple, so why is this called the Earth Temple again? The temple, like Skyview, implies that it's seen better days. There are only 5 rooms in this dungeon, but they are cavernous in nature. There are definitely parts that remind me of Dodongo's Cavern in Ocarina of Time. That's nice, I was gonna take it anyway. I do like these moments where you ride on a huge ball. It's easy enough to control. The solutions to the puzzles with this thing are obvious, and I do enjoy being able to attack from on top of the ball and just squash them flat. Once again, the beetle is a great way to scope out the layout of the dungeon and make your plan from there. Link's stamina meter is put to the test as he must run up a huge slope while also avoiding boulders. It's a good way to put this mechanic to use. That being said, the timing on this boulder that you have to hope blows up with a bomb is a little annoying. The dungeon has long, circular roads like a serpent, and this scene reminds me of Indiana Jones. One hit and it's over? Yeah, that's what I get for overshooting the exit. Whose fault is that, man? Seems you didn't do your job. Whatever, boss time. Skaldara, eh? I guess it's appropriate. The best approach is to take the high ground, blast him with a bomb, and then while he's sucking things up, make sure he swallows a bomb. Reminds me of Andros from Star Fox 64. Then try to slash the exposed eye. Fortunately, you can restock on bombs if you run low, so all in all, it's not too hard of a boss, just a taxing one. I'd like to go back to Skyward after I complete a dungeon and take care of business. This minigame where you carry the pumpkins is tricky. I really can't think of another word to describe it. Just put them in a cart and carry them, Link. One thing this game offers is the ability to upgrade your items at a shop, and I consider that a very useful feature. But with that, it's off to our next area, Linearity Desert. At first, it seems like a desert, but then you activate the time stone, which shows futuristic robots and hovercraft. Okay, the lore implications of this are just absolutely staggering. Zelda's world takes place in a post-apocalyptic world. That's pretty awesome, actually. The mechanics this opens up is most impressive. None of the robots seem to mind the fact that they've been deactivated presumably 1,000 years. Was this the world was like when Hylia and her chosen hero inhabited it? I'd love to know. Yes, I know there's a manga that covers this, but we're not going to get into that here. I like how you get to blend the past and future versions of the land to traverse it. I think that's a very unique concept. I love using the beetle to drop bombs into holes from above. I think that's a great idea that adds more versatility to the game. But then to turn on the next dungeon, you have to activate 5 generators, which just feels like more padding. Yeah, padding really brings this game down for me. Turn that valve the right way. Show off the motion controls. But after all that, you finally activate the generator and access the 3rd dungeon, the Linearity mining facility. Like the previous 2 dungeons, it shows signs of inward decay, which I think adds some mystique to the dungeons. I like how once again we are using Link's items to their versatility. All of the enemies are long dead, decayed into almost nothing. These blowfish that explode notwithstanding. I've always hated those things. Link may have good stamina, but even he can't make it through that much sand. Like the desert around you, you have to make use of the past and present time frames. What's a decayed sandy ruin in the present becomes a futuristic factory in the past. Link definitely gets his exercise, I would say. Only thing I hate is accurately hitting these futuristic beamos in the eyes is a little tricky than I would like. I really do love the use of puzzles in this game as they are very fun and rewarding to figure out. The item he gets the Gust Bellows, which allows Link to blow air. It is largely used for cleaning up huge wads of sand. The motion controls definitely open up new ways to defeat returning enemies. The boss battle is against Moldark. The trick here is to slash the eyes in his claws at just the right angle, which is pretty easily telegraphed. He'll retreat under the sand, so you would just have to blow away the sand, but it's all pretty easy. Not the best boss, but not the worst either. After the cutscene with Zelda, Link gets the goddess's harp. Every 3D Zelda has some kind of musical instrument, except for Twilight Princess, which did something a little different. I can't say I'm the biggest fan of using this thing with motion controls, as my playing is erratic, but I guess it's something unique, so I'll let it slide. Following that, the game forces you to fight the Imprisoned for the first time, and his big toes are so obviously the weak point. The biggest problem with the Imprisoned is that you have to fight him 3 times over the course of the story. In his second form, he has fingers, but fortunately Groose has a new invention that will stun him for a few seconds, which does put Groose to good use. Unfortunately, the Imprisoned is just very hard to take seriously as he looks ridiculous. The basic goal is to jam the spire back into his forehead, and I do like at the very end Link has to use the Groosinator, as Groose has so elegantly named it, to get on top of the Imprisoned and jam it back in. But the fact that you have to fight him 3 times is a recurring problem in the game's boss battles. Following some more padding to install the mirrors on Skyloft, Link will head inside the Thunderhead, which is appropriately named. After a simple puzzle to reach inside the tall island, I really do like the atmosphere of the Thunderhead, as it allows a sense of where am I and how did this come to be. I suppose I appreciate the time to just relax and have fun with the people of Skyloft, even if I really didn't understand the Goddess's Harp minigame. So back to the surface world, and Link has to check out the Silent Realm in each region. What's that mean? Link has to go to a realm with no weapons, nothing but the clothes on his back, and must collect a tear while also avoiding the Guardians. If Link gets hit by them, it's back to square one. You have to redo the whole thing all over again, which I'm not a fan of at all. Fortunately, when you collect a tear, the Guardians freeze, or you can collect these smaller orbs that will keep them frozen. That being said, there are ways to wake up the Guardians, such as touching the waking water. In that case, it's best to run like hell. This is also the only place where you can get dust relics, to my understanding, so you better go and gather those if you want to upgrade. Then comes the next part where Link must go back to every region he's been to. Again. Instead of giving us new lands to explore, we have to go back to where we've been before. Here, Link meets the water dragon in the first area. You see, while we are going back to where we've been to before, we have new areas to explore within them. For example, with the Farron Woods, you can go underwater now, having received the Water Dragon Scale, which allows Link the most maneuverability he's ever had underwater. Reminds me of the Zora transformation in Majora's Mask. The N64 version, not the 3DS version. Lake Floria is beautiful. Reminds me of the Lake Kingdom from Super Mario Odyssey. Farron is sick and Link has to go back to the Skyview Temple to get the water she needs to feel better. You can't be serious. I've never had to go back and revisit a dungeon I previously did unless I was going back to get an optional item that I couldn't get before. But no, here's more padding. Just go back to the first dungeon, get some water, and heal the water dragon. Then finally you access the next dungeon, the Ancient Cistern. The layout of the dungeon is interesting. It's water-themed with distinct Eastern architecture. The item you get in this dungeon is the whip, and I love using this thing, whether it be the swing to ledges or the flip over lily pads or flip switches that are out of reach, or in one case, stealing a small key off a guard. Many of the sections of the dungeon revolve around underwater sections, which puts the water dragon scale to good use. I love the underground area, which just reeks of zombies, it has such an eerie feel to it. In fact, one of my favorite moments was climbing a rope with zombies coming after you. It feels very Indiana Jones. Or the ceiling is about to fall. Okay then. Now for the boss battle. Girahim decides instead of killing Link here and there, he'll just summon a boss to do it for him. Coloctus. What a name. I gotta say, I really do love this boss battle. Using the whip to pull off its arms, then after literally disarming it, picking up sword and swiping at its body to damage the heart just feels immensely satisfying. There's not much to the boss, but it's one of my favorites in all of Zelda. So your reward for the Lanayru Desert Spirit Realm is the claw shots. Alright, now that's a reward I like. Maybe they'll explain how the second one is in the remains of Skyloft and Twilight Princess. Too much to ask for? Yeah, probably is. But this opens up a new area to explore in the desert. Upon accessing the new area of Lanayru Desert, you got to explore what was once a vast ocean before it all dried up and became a desert. Huh, that's interesting. Maybe this is how Wind Waker became the Breath of the Wild world. Ah, never mind. The minecart minigames are rather hard to control, and I will say this is probably the most annoying piece of heart in the entire game for me. There are some surprises I admit I didn't expect as I searched for the sand ship. The whole area makes use of the time shift stones, and I will admit it's a rather clever way to traverse the area. The sand ship has two modes, the present where it is a ruined wrecked field with sand, and the past where it is active. I really like the design of this place. It really applies creative thinking, such as using your new bow and arrow to activate and deactivate the time shift stone when at appropriate locations is very effective, and it's one of my favorite uses of the bow and arrow. I also love the mini-boss fight that takes place on the scaffolding that requires you to push him back to the edge and knock him off. Very well done. Reminds me of the final fight in Peter Pan. To top off this dungeon is a very fantastic fight against Tentacles. You see its tentacles destroying the ship. You have to constantly call upon Skyward Search to destroy the tentacles, then hit its eye with the bow and arrow. It's a nice way to combine the bow with the sword. It's a fight that keeps you on your toes. So far, with the exception of having to fight the imprisoned more than once, the bosses have been a consistent highlight. So now it's off to the volcano again, this time in the Silent Realm. Link gets fire shield earrings that allow him to enter incredibly hot places without taking damage. Eat your heart out, hero of the wild. But then when you finally seem to be reaching the temple, no, you have to go all the way back to Faron Woods to get a big bucket of water from the dragon, so that you can then go back to the temple entrance and douse the water. Padding at its finest. Again. But because the robot decides to show off, you gotta escort him up the entire mountain to the temple entrance instead of just dropping him at the entrance. Which means fighting every monster to protect the stupid robot. So finally, after all that is done, let's enter the Fire Sanctuary. I will say this, I do love the aesthetic of the Fire Sanctuary. Navigating the dungeon requires shooting down water fruits with whatever you want. Rescuing the Mogmas is also helpful as they will reward Link. The item is the Mogma Mist, which allows Link to dig underground and essentially travel underground. Of course, the way you fight some of these earthworms, or at least I think that's what they are, can be, what's the word I'm looking for? Interesting. Yeah, let's go with that. The boss is the second fight with Girahim. A little close there for comfort. Okay then. It's more or less a repeat of the last fight, just with more added to it. I had to really practice how to fake him out with my sword swings. He starts to get sloppy when he pulls out the two swords, which shows that Link is starting to get to him a little bit. Yeah, you should just kill him now. After another quest that involves getting Lavios to show up, which is just more padding, Link has to fight that parasite that's infecting Lavios. I do like this boss as it allows Link to make good use of his Lawfling, even if the eyes are a little squeaky for my liking. Reminds me of Donzo's Sharingan arm. Once you clear that, you have to battle on top of Lavios. You just have to deflect its attacks back at it by swinging your sword in the proper direction, which is a little more annoying than it needs to be. Following that, you must now complete 3 trials to access the final one on Skyloft, to gain each part of the song each dragon holds. The first is in Faron Woods. It involves the area flooding. Link must collect Tad Tones, and this is just pure padding at its finest. Then going to Eldin, Link loses all his items and must find them all. I actually quite like this part as it encourages stealth, which is not something Link has to do very often. It's a nice little change on the formula. I also managed to get the last of the Gratitude Crystals, and Batrix is, you look better as a monster. Reviving Lanayru is a complicated process that requires backtracking, but it does unlock a boss gauntlet. I was able to get both the Piece of Heart and the big prize, the Hylian Shield. The one shield that doesn't break. I guess that's worth it. Following that is one last Silent Realm. Oh goody, I'm not going to bother going into it since I'd be repeating myself. I'm just not a fan of how getting hit means you have to start the whole thing all over again, but hey, no more Silent Realms!
And there was much rejoicing.
All that leads into the final dungeon, of sorts, where Link and Fi head inside, and are basically tasked to acquire the Triforce. The way this place works is Link must arrange the order each room is in. They are a collection of puzzles that Link had to do throughout the game. It's a nice way to make the player's experience culminate in one final sequence. Acquiring each Triforce piece is fairly simple when you get down to it, but now the Triforce is completed. Like so many times, Link makes his wish upon the Triforce, and the imprisoned is squashed like a bug. Boy, when he wished for Demise to be destroyed, he went overboard. Upon arriving back at the Sanctuary, Link finally goes to wake Zelda up, and what follows is one of the sweetest moments in all of Zelda. For once, Link is the one waking her up, so it seems like a happy ending. It's all resolved. But wait, we forgot one little thing. Now, you all should have seen that coming. Giram doesn't kill him while he's down. I guess it's because he wants to get Demise resurrected. So now begins the climax of the game, and I will say this, the setup is pretty awesome. Link must return to the past and stop Girahim before he sacrifices Zelda. This whole charge, I have mixed feelings about it. On one hand, it's a great way of showing you how the player's skills have improved, but it's impaired by the inability to run while swinging your sword. Eventually, when you make it to Girahim, he shows his true form, which is that he looks like Fi. The final battle against Girahim takes place on platforms above the arena. The goal is to knock him off and impale him while he lays prone. It's a nice little culmination of what you've learned throughout the game against him. Eventually getting him down to ground level, you have to deflect his attacks back at him. No Zelda boss ever seems to realize that this isn't a good idea. When he pulls out that sword, you have to break the sword apart with tying swings. Just feels like they went, okay, that's not enough, we have to do more. But Girahim is ultimately successful in resurrecting Demise. In his true form, I'm going to assume that's just the form he takes so Link can understand him. Zelda is rescued by Groose, and Demise invites Link to the final showdown at any time he pleases. Just to give you time to prepare. I mean, yeah, sure, why not? We all know what's coming. Time for the final showdown. I do like the backdrop of the final battle. Lightning, rain, it all creates such an atmosphere. When first he shows up, just smack away at his sword. It's here I realized how useful the shield bash is at knocking him off balance and letting you get a free hit in, but that's only stage 1. This section of the battle, well, you have to put the Skyward strikes to the test to get the lightning to your sword. But after that, Demise falls victim to the same fate as Ganondorf. Let's finally address this part. Before he fades away, Demise tells Link that an incarnation of his hatred will forever haunt him and Zelda's descendants. And everyone knows that this is Ganon. Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of this idea. since I feel it devalues Ganon as the big bad of the franchise, but it is what it is, I suppose. Whatever the case, happy endings are abound, Zelda is safe, tearful goodbyes are held, as Link and Fi must part ways as Link puts the Master Sword into the pedestal, and they are parted forever, until every time Link gets the Master Sword. And the heroes return to their proper time and realize that Impa and the old woman were the same person all along. As the credits roll, we get to see what Zelda was up to. Wish we could have played that. So how do I feel about Skyward Sword? Well, I don't hate the game. The art style is beautiful, the motion controls take some getting used to. If I have any problem with the game, it's an erratic pace that really brings it down a couple of notches. The HD version on Switch is the definitive version as far as I'm concerned. It's a fine HD remaster. It makes me wonder how Nintendo is going to do GameCube and Wii games for Switch Online. The final scene is a nice scene as it's truly, this is how it all began. All Link and Zelda have to do is remove their clothes and they'd be Adam and Eve. In fact, I'm sure they're both about to do so. I'll leave you with that. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please hit that bell, like, and subscribe button. If you want updates, follow me on Twitter or join my Discord, which are provided in the link below. If you want to support me, check out my Ko-Fi page, which is also provided in the description below. See you next time.